Welcome to This Week in Habsland. I am Jordan, and I am joined by my co-host Brian, and we are here each Monday to discuss all things Montreal Canadiens. You can find us on social media at Blue Sky and TikTok at HabslandPod. So on this week's episode of the podcast, we will dive into 3 burning questions that will define the next few months of the Montreal Canadiens season, and Brian's done a player tiers list of how each Habs player has performed so far this season. But first, while we know this is the 3/4 point moment of the season, we wanted to dive in maybe quickly on the week of games that the Canadiens just had. And we can tackle on that Ottawa game that we already discussed a little bit last week, because Brian, the Habs are on a winning streak. And I think I am confident in saying have re-entered the mix. What have you seen from this week's play of games? And we're going to get into the trade deadline stuff and how that might be affected, but like, are you encouraged by what you've seen? Not just results, so I want to make that distinction, but by play on the ice as well in the past week or so.
Yeah, certainly I'm encouraged based on the Carolina game, based on the Ottawa game. Very encouraging. Playing down to your opposition against the Sharks and even I'd say Buffalo, less so, but they did get the results. Right. And so sometimes you have to just I won't say lucky, but sometimes you have to just get the results, even if you didn't necessarily deserve them. It took overtime to beat the Sharks. And then Buffalo, they did perform a little bit better. I think something that helped them perform a little bit better was the literal wake-up call from Martin St. Louis at practice, shouting at them, wake up. Because now's the time. These last, 22-ish games that they have left, I think it's exactly 22. These matter so much now. And the next 5 or 6 matter probably more than anything. Because if you sort of fall by the wayside now, you're never catching up. And if you make a statement and win 5 or 6 in a row, something like that, that's absolutely huge for this run. The Canadiens, as you said, are on a winning streak. This is the longest winning streak since Martin St. Louis has been their coach. It's the first time since February 2022 that the Habs have won 4 in a row. That seems astounding to me. I mean, I know we've had bad seasons.
Yeah.
The really awful one, I wasn't expecting them to get more than a 2-game winning streak. But last year, I could have sworn I thought they had at least one good run, but 3 games at most. And even this season, 3 games at most up until now, even during that really good stretch. So this is really refreshing. And then we play Buffalo again, this time at home, after a very spirited tilt with aggressive hitting and shenanigans in front of the net all night long. So that'll be a really exciting game, and that's an important one too. Have you been satisfied with the Montreal Canadiens play? I started this off by saying that the results are great. I would have liked to see more against the weaker teams, but against the Hurricanes especially, really good stuff.
So there's a cynical view of this of Ottawa wasn't ready to play. The Canadiens played better, but it was, I think, more of an indictment of how bad Ottawa was that night. The Carolina game was great. Carolina's been a bit of a boogeyman for the Habs, and I was thinking back, and I thought it was kind of poetic how 2 seasons ago, the Habs played a game towards the end of the season against the Carolina Hurricanes. They lost 3-0. They got completely outclassed, and Samuel Montembeault had 47 saves in that loss. I believe you may have considered it for performance or game of the year for Montembeault that season. It was kind of nice to see that be a little flipped this time around, where the Canadiens were, I think, definitely the best team. Now, we do have to mention Carolina is in a super weird spot where I think they've lost 6 out of 8 games. The only teams they've beaten are the worst team in the West and the worst team in the East in that stretch. This whole Rantanen stuff, which I think we're going to get into from maybe tangentially in the second half, that has played, I think, a bit of a role in there. So, but nonetheless, they beat Carolina, which is an accomplishment. San Jose, they sucked. They did not play well against San Jose for a second time this season. It just so happens that San Jose is terrible, and Caulfield scored the goal of the year.
Yeah.
So
stunning.
And then Saturday night, I actually was Buffalo came out to wreck things. They came out hitting everything in sight. And it's just that Buffalo's not a very good hockey club, and the Canadiens did just enough to hang in. I thought they were better against Buffalo than they were against San Jose, just like you said, but still not entirely convinced of their play. I thought Dobesh was good in moments. His rebound control wasn't the best, and that kind of led to some tougher situations defensively, but the Habs were also getting caved in at times as well. 2, 3, 4 shifts in a row where everything was in the defensive zone. So I feel like this is hockey. It levels out. This is why they play 82 games. There are games that they play that you're like, hey, they maybe should have won that one. They don't. And sometimes the other way around. So I don't think Like, I think they've had better 4-game stretches this season, but they just may have not won all those 4 games, if that makes sense.
Yep, that's really well said. And I want to draw our attention to the guy who's had the most, I think, solid play, possibly one of, but certainly more solid than he's been all season. That's Juraj Slafkovsky.
Right.
What a week from Juraj Slafkovsky. He is showing up now. He had that quote where he said that he's angry to win a game. There was some other stuff. He called his play in the first half embarrassing, his own play, you know. But now he's angry. He's angry to win a game. That was the way that he put it. And I think that if the Canadiens want to have a chance, everybody's got to play like that. They have to take a lesson from this young kid who's putting it all on himself. And yeah, fair enough. You weren't playing up to snuff in the first half, Slav. Now you are. Keep it up. That's awesome. That's terrific.
I think both him and Newhook are 2 guys now who like seem to be ending the season strong. I mean, there's a quarter left. There's 20 games left. It does not forgive the poor starts they had. And we've talked like, when we talk about poor starts, there's the Suzuki one where it's like 3, 4, 5 games for him to get going, plus the preseason. That's not a poor start. The poor start is the first 20, 30 games, and that was what happened to Slafkovsky and Alex Newhook to another extent. Turning it on in the second half is good, and especially with these games somewhat mattering, but I would still like to see it in the first half of the season. But that's not something to discuss right now.
Yeah.
With that, Brian, we're going to kind of turn the tables. You're going to, I feel like in the past, we've had me present ideas, present tiers or rankings and stuff, and you kind of bounce off those ideas and what you thought of it. So today you're in the hot seat. Why don't you explain to the audience what you're going to present to me?
So I have made a 7-tier tier list. I tried to keep it at 6 to do like the S, A, B, C, D, F thing, and there was just a little bit too much separation in one particular tier. But what this basically is, the first 3 quarters of the season, the first 60 games, I wanted to see who's contributed the most positively to the fact that the Canadiens are still, in fact, in the mix, as you said earlier. So I've got 7 tiers here. And in the past, I think you've gone from bottom to top.
Yeah.
I was thinking of going top to bottom because we always do the 3 stars of the quarter marks. And basically the reason we're doing player tiers instead of the 3 stars is it's the same ones and it's obvious. It's in the first tier, the 3 stars, that's what I'm calling the tier. It's Suzuki, Caulfield, and Hudson.
Yeah, it's this is like to let people behind the curtain a bit. I was struggling with like, this is our 3/4 point. We would do 3 stars. I just asked Brian earlier in the week, I'm like, do we really have to do this? Because how many more times can we talk about the brilliance of Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, and Lane Hudson? We can compartmentalize it to be very, very short right now. What I will say is Hudson may have played his best game offensively on Saturday night against Buffalo. His like 80-foot, 100-foot passes are becoming very regular. And what we saw in the first 20 games of the season where everyone was like, whoa, why is he making that pass? To like, oh, I'm ready for that pass now. That's been something that's been changing. Caulfield needs 1 more goal to get to 30, which again, it would be a career high. He's eclipsed his career high with his 29th on Saturday. And then Nick Suzuki has just been all around consistent again. Was on Hattie watch on Thursday against San Jose. Would have been nice to see him. I don't think he has any hat tricks so far in his career, so that would have been nice. But all in all, like, these are the 3 best guys on the team. We've been saying it all year. Our trade value rankings indicated as such, with one Russian exception. So these guys are awesome. I have nothing else to add other than I'm very happy they're on the team.
Yeah, of course. There's no way to feel about it other than to be just thrilled that they wear the CH. Caulfield's goal, I know you addressed it already, but holy crap, that was pure filth. The underpants that belonged to Celebrini and his jockstrap were available in the lobby for sale afterwards because they were removed by that disgusting through the legs deke and then putting it top shelf. Just filth, Caulfield. Yeah. Absolute filth. I was rooting for a Suzuki hat trick as well, and then I saw that. I was like, it's fine. Let him have the winner. That was worth it. That was worth Suzuki not getting the Hattie. So that's the first tier, the 3 stars. I think we've talked about them all season. They're tremendous. I don't think we need to talk about them anymore. Let's jump to the second tier. So these are 5 players, and obviously I made this tier list. Jordan's not to be blamed for where the placement of these things, but I do expect you to maybe fight me on a few things. If you don't like the placement of somebody, jump in and we can move things around. But this one I'm fairly comfortable with, I think. I don't think you'll have much problem with this. Second tier, the guys I'm calling integral to the run. And the run, it's not a playoff run yet, but it's being in the mix. This season, they've played well enough to be in the mix, so that run. It's Evans, it's Armia, it's Carrier, it's Goulet, and now it's Slavkovsky. I think literally 5 games ago, Slavkovsky would have dropped into a lower tier.
So I have no notes about Carrier or Goulet. I do want to bring up Carrier in a moment. What a trade that's been. Those guys, 100% fantastic. I'm so sad Caden Goulet's out for the year. I'm good with Slavkovsky being on that list. I think he's like, it's really limit that him being part of the second tier, but it's been trending upwards, and maybe we're building some of that in so far. Evans and Armia is a bit tough for me. Jake Evans has 2 goals since the beginning of the new year, and one of them was Saturday night, and it was an empty netter, which, by the way, I think Christian Dvorak deserved. I know like that's just how it went, but I thought Dvorak played one of his best games of the season on Saturday.
Yeah.
So the hot streak, like the Jake Evans hot streak of, was it late November, early December, maybe through mid-December? It's been over for a long time now. It hasn't come back. I don't know if that can be tier 2. I know what he does on the penalty kill. I know how important that entire fourth line is, although the fourth line kind of fell apart when Emil Heineman was out of the lineup. So I would just put some notes on both Evans and Armia. I'm also interested, like, I know you have Monty in the next group. I think Montembeau's done so much heavy lifting for this team that would probably get some consideration. But all in all, I can't disagree too much with that.
Okay. So I said earlier that there was one spot where I had to sort of add a tier because I couldn't have like 11 guys in one tier, because the next group is very similar to this, and Evans Armia were on the bubble a little bit. I could have even maybe adding a tier and going to 8 would have worked, but 8 tiers for 24 guys seemed like a lot. So I just left it at that. Maybe we can add some context. Let's do the next tier and see if that clarifies things for Evans and Armia. So the next tier I'm calling positive contributors. So these are guys who have contributed positively all season. Maybe haven't had quite as much an impact as Goulet or Carrier, for instance, but they are Gallagher, Matheson, Heineman, Montembeau, Dobesh, and Anderson. And within the tiers, I'll just say this now, I should have said it at the start, they're in no particular order.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, Gallagher isn't miles above Dobesh just because they're a few spots apart. They're all in the same sort of tier. Dobesh is the only one I was unsure of because he's played so few games, so he could have been lower down. But in those games, he's been really great, with the exception of just maybe 2, I would say. 2 of those losses of the 3 were not stellar, but the defense also kind of fell apart around him. So what do you think of this third tier, the positive contributors?
I think it's mostly accurate. There's one obvious omission that I know is the only person in your fourth tier that we'll get to him in a moment. But beyond that, I don't have too many notes on it. Dobesh absolutely, I think, is in this tier. The same way Carrier belonged in tier 2, because Carrier was literally a midseason trade, but Dobesh kind of felt like one as well, even though he was just brought up from Laval. We can't understate how much of a stabilizing factor those 4 things that all happened around the same time, which was the Carrier trade, Dobesh being called up, Hudson to power play 1, and Line A coming back from injury. Those 4 things happened all within it felt like 2 weeks. And that stabilized the entire season. So Dobesh should absolutely be in this group. I'm happy you have Josh Anderson in here. Question on Anderson. I have posited this theory, and I think there's some truth to it, but I want to know what you thought. We've learned this week that Josh Anderson's playing through some type of injury. He looks like he's hunched over in pain after 50% of his shifts at this point. I'm wondering if he doesn't want to come out of the lineup because compared to last season, he is having so much more fun playing hockey. Last year, he was the whipping boy on the team for the fans. Justly or unjustly, he was getting power play time. He was getting top 6 minutes. He was not contributing other than that wicked 4 to 6 week run he had in December and January last season. This year, I don't know if they've ever come out and said it, but I'm going to guess there was a meeting with St. Louis and Anderson at the beginning of the year and said, you're changing your role. You're bottom 6. You're killing penalties. That's what you're going to become. He has thrived in that. If you look at his numbers offensively this year versus last year, they've already matched. He has the same number of points, but less minutes, less prioritized offensive zone time. And I'm just wondering, is he just having fun again? And that's why he's okay, these injuries hurt, they suck, but I'd rather just keep playing through this. And also, the team is better than it's been in the past few years, so it's good to play for a quasi playoff contender.
Yeah, I think it's both of those things. I think it's also a fear that if I come out, like things change so fast in the NHL. If I come out now, miss a few weeks, someone else steps in, looks, nearly as good as I did, and then I come back and I can't find it anymore. I can't find the game that I found because it is a new, he completely changed paradigms this season. So falling back into the old groove of the way that he played might be a fear of his. I think it's probably the fun thing. You're probably right that's the main thing. Like he's just having fun. He doesn't want to step out of the lineup. He's a competitive guy and he wants to make a run for playoffs. So I think that's all very well said. Jordan, do you want to do more on these guys, or are you pretty content with?
I'm good on it. I wanted to bring up Carrier one more time, and I've been wondering this, Brian. The Carrier Barron trade is the best in-season trade that the Montreal Canadiens have made since when? And I will put the qualifier of this is with including the Habs receiving an actual player back. We love the Monahan trade from last year, like that netted a first-round pick. That's not a real hockey player. In terms of like a hockey trade where the Canadiens actually received a player, I think the answer lies in about 8 or 9 years ago. So like the closest thing recently would have been Eric Staal in 2021. This is much better than that.
Yeah, no question.
Then in terms of like in-season trades, like you have to go all the way back to the poo-poo platter of 2017, which again, I'm about to compliment Marc Bergevin, so like give me a moment here to not do so. This was the last great regular season this team had, and at the trade deadline, he brings in Brandon Davidson, Jordy Ben, Dwight King, Steve Ott, and Andreas Martinson. Like Dwight King is the headliner that everyone seems to remember, but it's all those acquisitions of like this is a 110-point team with peak Shea Weber, peak Carey Price, and anyways. So the answer, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Brian. Maybe I'm missing someone. 2016 is Phil Danault, and 2015 is Jeff Petrie.
It has to be one of those two. I mean, your memory's better than mine is, Jordan, and I can't remember another one that was impactful as those. So I think it's that.
Yeah. So it's a big deal. It's the biggest midseason trade the Habs have made in almost a decade, and it's been great. Okay, I've distracted us enough. Let's get into the fourth tier.
So the fourth tier. So this one's interesting. You said this guy could be in tier 3, and I agree with you. He absolutely could, but I wanted to put him alone because his story is so drastically different from anybody else's. His tier also could have been put between tiers 2 and 3. Like he can kind of float around, but depending on how you view power play goals, because this next tier is power play goals are fun, and that's Patrick Laine. He's alone in this tier because almost all of his goals have been scored on the power play. At 5-on-5, most of the season was a little bit rough. He seems to have figured it out a little bit. I'm liking the chemistry that we're seeing with Owen Beck, who we haven't mentioned yet, but Beck got his first point this week. Beck is taking on a huge responsibility, replacing Kirby Dach as the second-line center between an elite scorer in Patrick Laine and Alex Newhook, who's also in the midst of finding his game. And it seems to be working so far. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction, I think, due to an unfortunate injury. So is Laine in the wrong spot here? I deliberated on this just sort of by myself forever, trying to figure out, does he belong in integral to the run because he scored so many important power play goals? Should he be in the positive contributors because at 5-on-5 he wasn't as good? I ended up putting him below those guys because I view 5-on-5 as being the most important thing, but I'm open to changing it if you disagree.
He's at least one tier too low. He's at, like, you can't tell me Brendan Gallagher has been more important to the Canadiens than Patrick Laine has. Gally's had a great season. Laine has 11 power play goals in 34 games. Like
very fair. I mean, so my argument for Gallagher is that he's been playing with a less than ideal center, and yet all of his numbers are very good. Like his advanced analytics are very good. I mean,
Patrick Laine's played with Kirby Dach, who we're going to get into later on, but that did not have a good season.
Fair enough. So, okay. So is the move here to move Evans and Armia into their own tier, third tier, and then put Laine with the positive contributors, and then we still stay with 7 tiers?
Let's do that.
Okay. For those visual people listening right now, we apologize as we make changes to something that you can't see. So it's probably hard for you to keep up.
Yeah, it's all right. So your second tier makes, I think, a lot more sense now, where it's Carrier, Goulet, Slavkovsky. Your third tier is Laine with Evans and Armia, right? And then your fourth tier is Gallagher, Matheson, Heineman, Montembeault, Dobesh, and Anderson.
And we could call the third tier now special teams masters or something. I don't know.
That's great.
Special teams folks.
Okay, next tier.
Next tier. So this is the 5th tier that I'm calling We See You.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've been there. That's basically the name of this tier. It belongs to Newhook, Struble, Doc, and Savard. So Doc, I'm going to kick it off with Doc, who had another knee surgery, is out for another, has been eliminated from the season due to another unfortunate injury. Really awful situation for him. Really sucks. Newhook is figuring it out, so he might be the guy that we could possibly bump up. And then Savard and Struble, I think, are in the right spot. They've sort of just been there doing their jobs. Savard in basically every night, Struble in less so, but when he's there, he's playing well enough,
Yeah, these are the, good attendance group. Like, I know Doc's injured now, but this is the, you're showing up your body every night, not always contributing greatly. Struble with Hudson has been very nice to see. Newhook turning it on. We'll see what happens towards the end of the season. Savard, I don't have many notes on this group other than the very next guy in your next tier should be in this group. Let's maybe get into that one.
Okay, so this is what I was wondering about, and I think this was recency bias. 6th tier, so the one we just did was We See You. This next tier is Need to See More. And Jack-Eye is the first guy in this group, and I think that is recency bias that I have him here because of the benching, playing, I think it was 3 seconds in one of the games this week because he made a couple of bad errors in the defensive zone. And we've seen that happen a couple times this season where he's just been so inconsistent. So I put him here because we do need to see more in terms of consistent, high quality of play. And then the other guy that's in here is Beck, but he's in here for a completely different reason. Still need to see more, but we just need to see him play more games. But prorated on a full 82 game season, Owen Beck is probably in the positive contributor tier, like the 3rd, 4th tier, something around there.
Yeah, it's an incomplete on Beck. It's way too soon. We'll see what the plan is long term with him for the rest of the season. But yeah, Beck's fine in that group. I would bump Jack-Eye up, and maybe I would remove Beck, put him as an incomplete, and put Jack-Eye up into the next tier.
Okay, fair enough. I like that. Maybe it was unfair to even include Beck because he's played so little. Okay, I like that. So now we're down to 6 tiers. The 6th tier. So we've done We See You, we've done Need to See More, and now we've seen enough. This is tier 6. We have seen enough. This is Christian Dvorak, this is Caden Primo, and this is Michael Pezzetta. In the case of Primo and Pezzetta, the proof's in the pudding. They've been either demoted or not played for a substantial portion of the season in the case of Pezzetta. But they're all in this tier also because all 3 are free agents who will not be re-signing unless it's with the Rocket. And Dvorak, I would be very interested to see if another team in the NHL will pick him up at free agency. And yes, of course, I hear it already. You're being biased towards Dvorak. I always am. So that's just par for the course. What do you think of these 3?
I would like to put a pin in the Dvorak conversation and bring it up later because I don't think the door is fully closed.
Okay.
I do think it's closed on Pezzetta and Primo. Primo's been playing very well in Laval.
Sure.
Habs missed the playoffs, 87 points. Good hustle, everybody. Jakub Dobiš, is he sent down in the starter for the Rocket in the playoffs? Presuming he finishes the season with the Habs, he plays 20-something Habs games, or maybe 20-something might be a bit high for what the pace is, but maybe he gets 18, 17 games in. At this point, he's been away from the Rocket for half the season.
Yeah.
Does he go back and be the starter over Primo?
So the team has played so well, and Dobiš and Primo have both played so well for the Rocket specifically, I don't think it actually matters. So I don't know the answer. I'll just be honest. I don't know the answer to this because if they do it, then what does that say to Primo? You're not our NHL goalie. They've already said that. And you're also not our AHL goalie. Sorry, buddy. And what does that say to Dobiš? I guess that's a positive sign. Like, we want you in games.
So I think certainly maybe for the success of the Rocket, it might not matter. But at this point, you're much more invested in Jakub Dobiš. So I think it would.
So my question of what does it say to Primo?
I don't care.
That doesn't matter.
You've already said he's not going to be on the team next year, so why would you give him high leverage games?
Yeah, that's a fair point, man.
Anyways, so I think that's it. Those were the 6 tiers?
Those were the 6 tiers. Those are the 24 guys. 23 now because we've removed Beck because it's probably just too early to talk about him.
Mm-hmm. Listen, I think that is I'm happy we did this exercise. I'm happy we didn't just regurgitate our 3 stars. It's interesting. It's I think that middle group, the one I keep thinking about is the Newhook, Struble, Doc, Savard, and now Jack-Eye group.
Yeah, tier 5.
Who can do what? Obviously, put Kirby Doc aside, but Newhook, Struble, Jack-Eye. It's okay, guys, you got 20 games left. Try to go up a bit, right? We see you, you've been there, but can you do a little bit more?
Yeah.
that's the interesting group to watch. I feel like some of the vets with where they are in that third tier, it's kind of like, okay, that's fine. Like, we're good. Galley, we get it. Anderson, we get it. Matheson, rough week for Matheson, although I don't know. There's few plays I enjoy more than a defenseman making a pass to a player who has a stick on the ice and all they do is just deflect it off the ice for that new hook goal. Good on Matheson for getting that assist, but rough week for him. Yeah, that's great. Any closing thoughts on your tiers list?
I don't think so. I am very curious to see how this changes towards the end of the season. If guys wake up after Martin's wake up speech, if guys trail off, because that could happen too. We hope not. But basically, I think anybody who's not in the second tier or better has to jump up a level for them to make a meaningful push. Like if everybody does that, they have a shot at playoffs, but it's a team effort. Everybody needs to be in it to win it. And that's the only way it's going to happen. Because yes, as you said before, we are back in the mix, but so are about 7 teams in the East. It's just craziness. The list goes on and on of teams, both New York's, Boston, Ottawa, Philadelphia now.
Columbus, Detroit, it's
Columbus, Detroit. I didn't even say because they're just above everybody else, but yeah, them too. Like even if one of them loses a couple games in a row,
I think it's something from first wild card to third to the bottom in the East is like 7 points right now.
Yeah,
so it's
exactly.
Are we in the mix? Are we just is it just smoke and mirrors? Who knows? Whatever. The team's trying hard for these games. Just complete sidebar. This would be a heck of a year for a play-in tournament. I'm just saying this would be an incredible opportunity for the play-in tournament because then it matters 7, 8, 9, and 10 in terms of the order, in terms of the preferences. Like we've talked about what we think a play-in should look like. Like realistically, it would not completely match the NBA's because that's a bit too much travel, but maybe it would be like 7 plays 10. 7 just has to win 1 game, 10 has to win 2 games, and 7 hosts it. Whereas 8 would host 9 in a best of 3. And that's just a best of 3. I feel like this would be a perfect year for it because of how darn close it is. It's actually justified. And like you 4 teams were so close down the end of the year for 82 games. You're separated by the end of the year. It's going to be what, like 6 points, 7 points between 7th and 10th. This would be a perfect year for it. I understand why some people don't want it. I also think there should be some clauses that we've talked about. Like, look, if the gap between 8th and 9th is 10 points, there's no play in this year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like the NHL is so stupid with some stuff and somewhat smart with other stuff. So I have no hope in it, but this would be the perfect year. Like imagine if you're Ottawa and you're 9th and you get that play-in tournament against Detroit. Like you're creating a new mini rivalry with Detroit and Ottawa, who have been like neck and neck in this like growing up towards becoming playoff teams. Anyways.
You're also giving hope and something to cheer for to a fan base that direly needs it. And not just Ottawa. Like there's other teams in a similar boat.
Yeah. Even the Habs. Like the Habs could be able to sneak in as like a 10 seed.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's not really a thing to discuss because the NHL hates innovation. Okay, so part 2 of the episode, let's dive into our 3 burning questions. We have to start off with trades because trade deadline is coming up on Friday, March 7th. A lot of rumors swirling around the Canadiens with the whole Evans Armia package. It has to be unknown really how much interest there is in David Savard. Have not heard Christian Dvorak's name once, so unsurprising there, but you never know. Brian, my question is, for our first question, what would be the best and worst case scenario, or outcome maybe we should say, for Kent Hughes at the trade deadline?
So I'm going to start with worst case because I'm excited about best case. The worst case scenario is they do nothing. They don't get an offer that they like, either buying or selling. Habs finish 18th, miss the playoffs, and lose the UFAs for nothing.
I'm so happy you brought this up because that's exactly my answer. It's two branches of the same annoying issue. One is what you just said, right? You don't trade anyone. The team spirals, not spirals, but like does just not enough to miss the playoffs, like to make the playoffs. And then you lose Evans and Armia. The extra is ... and then they lose them in free agency anyway. Then literally everything went wrong. The other version of it is you do trade them and you risk pissing off the guys in the room and the team kind of tanks and you lose them to free agency anyway. Right. That one, I don't know, that's the part that a lot of fans tend to not think about, even though I believe it to be an important component of it. You still have to make sure, okay, sure, Jake Evans might not be a part of the future, but how this affects Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Carrier, Caulfield. Like, there's so many guys, like 75% of this roster is going to be back next season. They're going to remember the time you gave up on them. So that is, yes, so that's worst case scenario, whether it's trading them and imploding or not trading them and like not imploding, but like just like missing the cut.
Yeah.
You know, on the Evans thing, we're going to play my favorite game, Brian. I know you were ready for it.
Okay.
Lots of smoke when it comes to Jake Evans. The contract, we know the contract already, right? It's 5 years, $4 million a year. It's been reported ad nauseum for the past 2 weeks. That's what Jake Evans wants. 5 years, $20 million total, $4 million a year. I don't know if you've exactly heard what the Habs have wanted. And then the other bit is, you know, they're far apart. That's all we know. They're far apart. Let's play the game, Brian. Who benefits from these leaks? Why does this come out?
Could it be the people leaking it, Jordan?
Yeah, so that has to be the Canadiens, right? Let me run through my theory.
Please.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because there's a second part of the leak that I held on so far. Who does it benefit? It benefits the Montreal Canadiens because if you are steadfast in like, well, I'm sure there's truth to it, but like, we really think we're going to have to trade Jake Evans, and we're worried about that thing I said earlier about what's this going to do to the room? What's this going to do to that Slavkovsky and Caulfield and Suzuki and Matheson and all those guys, Montembeault and Dobesh, like when you turn around and like trade your best penalty killer and your fourth line center. But if you're leaking consistently that like, hey man, like we're trying to do a contract with him, and like, boof, we are so far apart. Like for some reason, again, we don't know what the Habs are offering exactly, but we know that Jake wants $20 million for his next contract. And while we're trying, we can't make it all the way there. I think it kind of softens the blow. Like you're communicating to your team, to your players of like, we tried, we really did, but this was a dollars and cents thing. The other piece that I find interesting is the whole like, and I've never really heard this before, like packaging Armia and Evans and like they're a tandem deal. I wonder if that's also part of it where they're saying like, look, we're not trying to abandon Jake. Like we're not trying to like just kick him out. We want to do what's best for them. Like keep Armia and Evans together. And that's another part where it's like, even if they trade him, but they don't trade Armia, where it's like, look, we try to facilitate a change where he can be with, I don't know, like that part's been so confusing to me that the Habs are trying to trade them as a tandem. I get it. They're like penalty kill boys, but like, it's just a little weird. So I view it as like the front office is preemptively doing damage control for the players of them eventually trading Jake Evans. That's how I kind of view it, of them saying like, this is what happened. We tried to get a contract with him. We were just far apart. It's no hard feelings. It didn't work out. We need to look out for the best interest of the team. We traded Jake.
It does beg the question, what is the Montreal Canadiens offer? And I know you've alluded to the fact that we just don't know. We don't know what it is. But if it's substantially different, then, which frankly, I think it should be. Not that Jake Evans doesn't deserve the $20 million and that he would get it elsewhere. But when you think about the way that the Montreal Canadiens run their cap, I don't know that you can give that much money to a fourth line center when Beck has shown that he plays really darn well. So
yeah,
there's your replacement as early as next season. And that might even be too low in the lineup for Beck, depending how he progresses. So I don't think the Canadiens are in a position where they have to, you know, okay, all right, Jake, we surrender. We'll give you the 20 mil that you want. I don't think it's going to be that. I think if they re-sign him, it'll be closer to 3 per year. He could get 5 years. I don't see Jake Evans' style of play weakening significantly in the next 4 or 5 years. And if it does in year 5, whatever, you trade him then. But very interesting. Very, very interesting. I don't fully understand the tandem thing either, like trading them both together in bulk. But what I will say is if they do it, and I mean, even just the fact that that's the avenue they're looking at, have they already given up on in the mix, like their goal from the beginning of the season of being in the mix? You trade those guys tomorrow, Jordan, the Canadiens do not make the playoffs. I don't care who you bring in.
Of course.
And that's why I had them integral, like I had them in that higher tier. We eventually dropped them down, but that's why they were there at the start, is how important they've been to this team's success, especially early on. It worries me. It just flat out worries me, because like the way that they've played these last 4 games, the fact they're getting the results, the fact that the schedule is not that difficult and they're playing well against hard teams anyway, the Habs have a shot here. So if they have a shot, why be only talking about the packaging? Like I haven't heard that many rumors about buying. Have you?
No. I haven't heard anything. I think this is going to be a really interesting test for Hughes in the front office, because making the playoffs is not a big enough factor for the trajectory of this franchise. Making or missing the playoffs doesn't matter that much this season. Like it just doesn't in the grand scheme of things. It's next season is the first real attempt at a playoff season because you're going to have new guys coming in next year. We'll get to the free agency stuff in 2 questions, but like I don't think this is the year where you say no. We're really going to go for making the playoffs. Like I said this a month or 2 ago. Like I kind of put Armia to the side, but I said the Evans stuff should really just be if you can't get him to a contract you like, you have to trade him. Because, like you said, Owen Beck is at least 80% of a replacement already. He doesn't have the penalty kill expertise that Evans has, but everything at 5-on-5, Beck already does. Like it's the truth. And Oliver Kapanen's coming next year as well, who's, by the way, crushing it over in Europe. There's 2 center replacements already for Jake Evans. He has been a fantastic hockey player for the Montreal Canadiens. He's going to get a big fat contract in July. It's just that there are replacements for what Jake Evans does. And that's not to like diminish what he has done this season. It's just that you got to keep your powder dry for some of the bigger names. It's just the truth. So I'm still fully on I think they need to trade Jake Evans. Now, if all you're getting for someone's offering you a 3rd round pick or a 4th round pick for him, then it changes the question, right? It changes the math. But ultimately, I do think the best case scenario is trading Evans and Armia for good value. I think Arpin Bass, who said like the Canadiens are hoping for like a 1st and a 3rd or something like that for the 2 of them, which, I mean, maybe you're retaining some salary in Armia and that's what helps balance it out. But I'm sure there's a lot of playoff contenders that would love to shore up their penalty kill. And that's one easy way to do it.
That sounds low even as a price for 2 guys that are that good on the penalty kill and that important to a bottom 6.
Yeah. The other,
maybe I'm too close to it.
The other stuff for in terms of like best case scenario, let's transition into that quickly. It's also get some resources for Laval because we're draining them a bit, especially if Armia and Evans are getting moved. Beck is up. We're presuming Beck is up for the rest of the season until it's over, and then send him. He's for sure getting sent to Laval for the playoffs. If
the Habs don't make it, of course.
It's what do you do with like you need to get a couple reinforcements for Laval because they've had a great season so far, and it'll be brutal for it to fall apart in the last 20 games because you have to send up all these guys to kind of plug in the gaps in a team that's not going to make the playoffs. So whether that means bring up like a Colin White 4th liner stuff or get some extra reinforcements for Laval, I don't know, but that'd be the other piece of like get great value out of your UFAs, keep Laval afloat, and then send the reinforcements in mid-April.
Okay, I like that. I'm down to jump into the best case right away.
Yep.
And this might counter everything that you've just said about not vying for playoffs. Best case scenario, Devo out. I don't care how. Dvorak out.
Okay.
Because you're getting Crosby in.
Oh, gosh.
Or another left-handed 2C. But Crosby would be my guy. You add a depth right-handed defenseman and a depth forward. I'm all in, Jordan. I'm all in for playoffs. The East does not scare me half as much as it has in years past. I think that there's a lot of beatable teams at the top, especially if you have the best centerman of this era in Sidney Crosby jumping in as your 2C. That's a scary top 6 now. And then Beck moves down into Devo's spot in a more sort of natural role for him, a little bit less ice time. You keep Evans and Armia, and you actually have a shot. Like, if they traded for Crosby tomorrow, do you think the Habs now have the best chance of any of the mixed teams to get into the postseason?
Hey, why stop at Crosby? Just pick up Draisaitl and Cale Makar while you're at it.
So is that because you think this is completely far-fetched?
I do want to talk about Crosby again, but I do not see that being a mid-season trade, a trade deadline. I think that's a draft day trade. But let's just say maybe a bit more abstract, like pick up quality forwards, right? It could be Brock Nelson. Like, are you okay if we just replace this conversation to base it in some reality of like, it's Brock Nelson they're picking up?
No, because that if you're going to make the push towards the playoffs, you have to move the needle enough so that it's almost a no doubt.
So why rush it?
Brock Nelson doesn't.
Why rush it this season and not wait for the draft where it's much easier to make trades?
Because Pittsburgh is quickly realizing that they have to make a drastic change. The only team that Crosby would agree to go to midseason, I think, is the Habs. And which I actually, as I say that might make it less likely for them because the package would be slightly worse. But you don't just get him for this year. If it was just like a rental, it's probably not wise. But you got him 2 years. You got him this year and you got him next year. So is it then worth it to bring Crosby on next year when Demidov comes in and he gets to learn from one of the greatest forwards to ever play the game? I don't know. I'm just salivating at the prospect of having Suzuki into Crosby and then all these scoring wingers that you have. And it just seems like everything falls into place. But I'm looking at it glass half full.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're comparing here is you have a 0.01% chance and mine is a 1% chance. That is
to make playoffs?
No. To acquire Crosby at the deadline versus acquiring Crosby at the draft.
I think that the numbers are way higher than that. Honest, I think Crosby's going to start to get the feeling like time is running out for him, and he wants to put another stamp on his legacy. If I was him, that's what I would want to do. He's done everything he possibly could internationally. Yeah. He's done everything he possibly could with the Penguins, but his career with the Penguins won't last long enough for them to go through a full successful rebuild and come back and win again. So if he wants to win again, which I assume he does, everybody does, the Habs are the place to be.
I'm not disagreeing. I just don't think it's viable for the trade deadline.
Well, you did say best case. So even if it's 0.01%, if there's a chance.
You're right.
What's your best case scenario? Let's move to that.
It's what I said. It's you trade Evans and Armia, get the exact value you want, get some stuff for Laval to make sure that they're okay for their playoff run. That's it. Okay. That's the based in reality version of this. It's you are throwing up the white towel a little bit for this season, but it doesn't matter this season. I don't think, even if they keep this team together, I don't think it's a team that makes the playoffs. There's too many other teams vying for those final 2 wildcard spots. I think for the Canadiens to play well for this long and overtake them all. We just saw it. They had their great run in January, then completely collapsed for 2.5 weeks. Who's to say that won't happen again with this team? And also, like, injuries will start to take a toll. Gouldy's out. Doc is out. Anderson, you're thinking it's got to be eventually he's going to have to just, take a week off or something. I don't think this is the year to put all the chips in yet. I think they need to keep building it methodically, and let's not get too wrapped up in the idea of making the postseason. Second question. We'll come back to Crosby. I'm sure we will, because we're going to talk about centers. I think we're talking about centers nonstop because that's what it seems like the focus of the team has now come back to. So on that note, Brian, question 2, what is something that you have drastically changed your opinion on this season? So I have told Brian we are not allowed to answer Lane Hutson.
That one's too obvious.
It's too obvious, and that's the idea. Like and there's a great episode of Modern Family. I think it's in the first season that, people don't change plus or minus 15%. So it's okay if your opinion on someone or something has changed plus or minus 15%. I'm asking, like, what is something where you've done almost a complete 180 on? Just like, oh, wait, it's that. Like, Lane Hutson we thought he'd be good, not potentially the best player on the team as a rookie, right? That is a huge change up. Whereas, like, Jakub Dobeš, I thought maybe this is a guy for you, but for Dobeš, I was like, I think he can be a backup in the NHL. And he is. He's great. How much more can he be? I don't know. It's too soon to tell. But so my opinion of Dobeš hasn't changed. It's changed a bit, but not too much. So that's kind of it. Like, we're really looking at like significant shifts. And I wish we had done this exercise each of the past couple seasons, Brian, so we can kind of see over time, where have we like really changed on? So outside of Hutson, and it doesn't have to be player specific, although I presume it is, who or what have you changed your mind on dramatically this season?
So for me, this is a very negative one. It's one that I'm not going to enjoy talking about, but I think we have to, because it's the obvious answer. Even if he could stay healthy, which he can't. It's not his fault, but the durability of your players is a factor in team construction nonetheless. Even if Kirby Dach could stay healthy this season, he had the 3rd worst plus minus in the NHL behind Bertuzzi and Bedard. He was on pace for only 32 points. His faceoffs did not improve enough. He's still just at 40%. And the thing he does best, or he has done best historically, which is driving the play, was definitely not a strength every night. So as much as it feels really awful piling on a guy who's just had his season end abruptly and early yet again, we're coming at this from the perspective of, like, how do you make the Canadiens into a contender who can fight for cups year after year? And Kirby Dach, his potential as a second line center, that's really sort of the overarching theme here. Is it's not Dach himself, it's his potential as a second line center. That's what I've drastically changed my mind on. We're coming at this from the perspective of making the Canadiens a contender, right? So, like, Kirby Dach to me does not fit into that as a second line center. Can that change? Of course, but I think time is running out. Training camp next season, I will say, that has to matter more to Kirby Dach than to any other Montreal Canadien, or he will lose his spot very fast. What do you think about that?
So you and I think beyond more than maybe anyone else who follow the team, who very closely and watches every game, and I think you and I have preached patience the most, more than anybody else. I am confident in saying that. I think a lot of people after 15, 20 games were saying, okay, that's it, he's done. And there was another wave around 30, 35 games. Okay, he's done. You and I kept saying, and this has been my theme all year, like the opportunity cost this season is so freaking low. Like give him an extra 20, 30, 40 games. Like really, what is the difference? Right? With that said, and it's really too bad. It's the week that he underwent knee surgery. Like it does feel a little bit like piling on, but I think we were going to honestly bring this up, injured or not. I think it's time to put the job posting back up for a second line center. Like I think for the past 2 years, we're like, it's Kirby Dach. Kirby Dach is the top 6 center that was missing. I don't think that anymore. I think it doesn't mean he can't reapply. Doesn't mean he can't get an interview again, but like it's time to put that job posting back up. And there's guys in the organization like Beck and Kapanen that provide some interesting options. I don't know if either of them are top 6 potential really, but so they're also fairly early still in their development. Kirby Dach season, he never had the consistency. He was never physically consistent enough. Like there was too many games where he just wasn't able to control the puck around the boards the way he had in this 2023 season. And it just became more and more apparent that this is actually the hockey player that he is. And it's a 58 games he ended up playing this season. It's a good sample. It's a good sample. A guy who was on power play 1 for half the season, on power play 2 for the second half of the season. Like he got a lot of opportunities.
Yep.
So that is something I've changed my mind on drastically. I mean, when we did trade value rankings, Brian, I want to investigate this a bit. I had dropped him all the way down from 3rd down to 18th. I think you took exception to that and said probably around 9th or 10th, you would say. Now, I will say there was probably recency bias on your part because it was off of like a really hot 2 weeks.
Yeah, where he figured it out. He finally figured it out.
And then he cooled off again. So does 18 make more sense now? After having, this is the end of his season, he got injured again, and that has to come into play. That he's played
I think so.
1 season of 70 plus games in his career out of 6. So it's too bad, but I think that's something that's absolutely true. The second line center, it's something they have to look forward into changing. And I'm sure they were after 20, 30 games, but I think this makes it a lot more definitive that I don't think it's happening for Kirby Dach.
Yeah, it's a real shame. And I think it goes without saying that we feel for him and we wish for a speedy recovery. And obviously we want him to come back healthy and all that stuff. But this is something that happens in hockey. You get injured too many times, your development suffers, and the spot that you were vying for opens up and you start hearing footsteps and somebody else might fill it. It is what it is. I
do wonder what a 3rd line winger Kirby Dach looks like.
I think he's already there in terms of he's already good enough for that. So that doesn't worry me. He will be an NHL player, assuming he can stay just healthy enough to play.
Yeah.
Just as a baseline. But that was his ceiling, right? The second line center.
Yeah. What else did you have for this cat? That was the easy one. Our opinion changing on Dach, unfortunately for the worse, was the easy one after Hudson. Is there anything else that really jumped out to you where you're like, wow, I've really changed my mind on this?
I mean, I've always backed Gallagher, but his ability to put pucks in the net this year, it has impressed me significantly. So I would say that that's another one that like Gallagher is just timeless. It seems even his play style, like everybody thought years ago he would be done because of the way he battles hard in front of the net and just gets ransacked and the officials look the other way, but he's still doing it. He's still on a really, really good pace here. And then maybe Heineman would be the other guy that I could think of.
That's the one.
You're nodding your head, so that's the one for you probably.
Yeah. So Gally, yeah, sure. For Gally's a good one. I hadn't thought of that, but it's really like he's not done. The career is not over. Whereas like you could have told me a year and a half ago after that debacle of a 23 season where he came back too quickly from injury and he got hurt again. He was out for months, and they were like, "No, we're gonna sit down. We're gonna actually let our body recover, and then we're gonna come back." And he has figured it out. People have put aside the monetary amount that he's getting paid and just said, like, Brendan Gallagher's heart and soul, bottom six. We're not going to ask him to do power play. Well, not much. And we're not going to ask him to do anything penalty kill, not that we ever have. And that's going to be enough. So sure, like the tales of his demise were overstated. Heineman's the one where he may have gotten lost in the shuffle of the developing prospects to the point now where I think there's a good argument. The top six from a winger perspective starting next season is going to be a war zone because there are already four guys that have, there are already three guys that have completely earned the spot, and there's a fourth guy coming in, Ivan Demidov. After that, it's like, well, you still have Emil Heineman. You might have Kirby Dach as a winger. Like, there's a lot of guys already. Heineman's the one guy where after watching him for, 40 plus games this season, it's like, okay, that's a top 9 winger. Like, I don't know how much that changed my opinion, but I just feel like that was so much at the back of my mind, not thinking about it. And now having watched him through 40 plus games, it's like, this is a guy that helps you win a playoff round. This is a guy who in game 5 of round 2 has a goal and 2 assists.
Yeah.
Because he is built
and
to
hits
play
everything
like
that moves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that part's awesome where it's like, oh, like there's always these guys that teams pick up at the trade deadline where you're like, oh, they really needed that. We have him. Like we have that type of player already, and it's Emil Heineman.
You could say that about the whole fourth line, actually. Those are the guys that we need. The whole fourth line is that in a nutshell.
It's true.
It's
so true.
Back to Gally just for a second, because I meant to mention this and forgot. About his goal total as a Hab, can you imagine if he'd played more seasons with an offensive center? Dano for years and then Dvorak.
Yeah. I mean, also, could you imagine if Shea Weber didn't absolutely destroy his hands? So, like, there's a real argument that we've talked about Gally moving up the all-time goals list. I think he's at 17th right now. If it wasn't for those injuries and for being put in very defensive roles, like top number 9, we've always said like 9 where Aurel Joliat is at right now is kind of like the realistic max, because then there's like an 80 goal jump before you get to Henri Richard. Might have been in reach.
Yeah.
So it's great. Everything Gally is positive. Are you ready to move on to our last question, Brian?
Yeah, let's do it. We're rapidly approaching an hour, and this one's going to be interesting too.
So, third and final burning question. And I think for the first time Brian, this is our 98th episode, I think, of the podcast. I think we're quickly approaching our 100th. So, 98th episode. Brian, I think this is the first legitimate what should the Habs do in free agency conversation we're about to have. Yeah. We'll try to keep it brief because I think we'll talk about it a lot more. But this is kind of a place setter because this affects everything we just talked about like who's changed our minds. Okay, so Kirby Dach, second line center is open. What are they going to do with free agency with Jake Evans and Christian Dvorak? And like, okay, so what should they do in free agency? Because they are now at the time where it might start to make sense to dive in. Tell me if I'm wrong, Brian. Most important needs of the team are, stop me if you heard this before, second line center and a right-handed defenseman.
Wow, we're back in 2022, 2023, 2024.
Back in 2012, 2015. Well, no, I guess they had a good chunk of right-handed defenseman for a couple years there between Petrie, Subban, and
but the
Shea
center
Weber,
thing since the early 2000s, this has been the case. So,
all right. So here's the thing. Let's go over who the centers are available in free agency, right? Let's do the exercise. I found one guy, that fits from an age perspective-ish, from a quality perspective-ish, and who's actually an unrestricted free agent. It's Sam Bennett. That's the only guy.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it. He's the only good center that's under 33 years old. Brock Nelson, John Tavares, good players. They do not fit anything even close to the Habs timeline. Even as a bridge to Hage, I don't see it.
And which way does Sam Bennett hold his stick?
I knew you were going to bring this up. Yeah, of course. So he makes now. Okay. So we've identified the player. Tap on the back for us or searching Puckpedia. Does he fit? Does he make enough sense to commit what you're expecting? It's free agency. You're going to overpay. People have to understand. Unrestricted free agency, you will always overpay, but that is also because you are not actually giving up anything in this transaction. When you trade for a player, you literally give something to the other team, right? When the Canadiens traded for Philippe Danault, it was a second round pick they gave up in exchange. What you're essentially doing here is if you're signing Sam Bennett to, I don't know, 5 years, he'd want more than 5 years. Let's say 6 years at $6 million a year, because you're paying that extra $1 million a year. That's what you're exchanging. You're exchanging a $1 million surplus per year from what he's probably worth to get him. right? That's the beauty of free agency is you're not diminishing anything on your team. You're just using up cap space.
Yeah.
So I ask you, does Sam Bennett make sense as an interim second line center and maybe you bump him to third line center after like 3 years of the contract? There's a question, of course, like, does he actually want to leave Florida? But
so no, it doesn't. To me, it doesn't.
yeah,
because the price you're going to have to pay, he just won a cup. That's the other thing.
And he just looked good for Team Canada.
Of course. So the price, you said $6 million, the price is going to go up drastically because of those two very important factors, the cup being the most important one. So the amount the Habs would have to spend on a guy who is a perpetual 40-ish point guy, a 47% face-off taker, it's not for me. And that was the best name on the list, everybody. So let's not get excited for a center at free agency. So maybe Bergevin said it wrong. He said you can't trade for centers. That was a lie. Maybe you can't sign them. Maybe that was the thing.
So let's do the center discussion then. Let's compartmentalize it because that's number one need. Suzuki, we love you. After that, to begin next season, you're looking at Kirby Dach, Owen Beck, and Oliver Kapanen. That is not a team that makes the playoffs. Okay?
No.
Jake Evans, traded or not, seems unlikely at this point to be re-signed. This is where I was saying that like maybe a 1-year insurance contract for Christian Dvorak makes sense. Because I don't know are you ready to have 2 full-time rookies as your third and fourth line center?
When they're better players than Christian Dvorak, definitely. Does Dvorak improve your chances at playoffs? I think
he's insurance. Opposite. You sign him to a 1-year, $1.5 million deal, and you can send them to Laval at any moment with barely touching your cap. Like that would be my thinking. Like,
I guess.
Because I don't know what else. Like we did the Crosby stuff. I think Crosby in the offseason makes a heck of a lot more sense. I'm more willing to discuss it as a realistic possibility. Because what you can do is go to Pittsburgh and say, well, first of all, like blanket on top of all of this has to be Crosby's decision. It starts and ends with him. If he says,
of course,
I want to go win. I just had a great time at the Bell Center for the Four Nations. I want to go play for Montreal. If he says all of that, which who the hell knows, then the Habs can go to the Penguins front office and say, we can offer you a unique package that kickstarts your rebuild immediately. We can offer you a first, a second, a third, a fourth, throw in Oliver Kapanen and Alex Newhook.
Yeah.
Because I think that's decent value. I don't know if it was open market, they would get better value for Crosby, but that's the point. It's not going to be an open market. You just have to give them a fair trade. And I think if you're basically saying, here's an entire extra draft plus a good center prospect plus, a middle six winger, I don't know how much better you can really realistically do than that. Because from free agency, getting a center this offseason, I don't see the guy.
No, I just don't think it's feasible. The other guy we've discussed in the past is Dylan Cousins, who we just saw and we're going to see again in Montreal. Yeah. Whether that one makes sense or not as an off-season trade, I don't know either. More exciting than Sam Bennett to me, another right-handed guy. So, take a drink for me mentioning that. But yeah, the answer is really not clear for a second line center.
Okay.
And that's kind of the story of the NHL in the 2020s. Yes. It's just there's not enough top 6 centers to go around. So there's going to be teams that just don't have good ones.
But that's
I pray the Habs are not them. Yeah.
Yeah, let's expand because that makes more sense because the quality is not diluted enough. Okay. So, no centers. We don't have to force it, right? Let's go down to the next thing on our list. Right-handed defenseman. Okay, let's rub our hands a little bit, get excited for this one. I really only see 2 options that are at least or better than Alex Carrier. That's kind of my Mendoza line. If you're not as good as Alex Carrier, I'd rather just have Reinbacher and Mailloux take on the spot. So goodbye, Cody Ceci. I looked at Dante Fabro, even though he was on waivers earlier this year. I was like, I don't know, maybe this guy. And of course, Jonathan Kovacevic is the other one that I guess we should bring up. I don't know how likely it would be, but again, if that's the quality you're going after, I'd rather just give those minutes to Mailloux at this point and let Mailloux run with it. So the 2 guys I haven't named yet, Neil Pionk in Winnipeg and Aaron Ekblad in Florida. Are those the 2 guys you identified as well?
Of course. Of course it was. When you mentioned Jonathan Kovacevic, my ears perked up as that would be inexpensive. But if you're looking for quality at the top end in the top 4, it's Ekblad and it's Pionk. And that's basically it. Unless you want to get a guy who's 36 years old.
No, that's it. It's those 2 guys. They will be expensive. And
no question.
So Winnipeg.
Ekblad for the same reason as Bennett for the playoff, the ring.
Yeah. Ekblad, underrated player at this point. I think we can say like for sure in Florida. Like they just traded for Seth Jones. I don't know what that means long term for Aaron Ekblad. Same thing with Pionk in Winnipeg. They have some big guys who are coming up on their it's not just him. There's one guy we might mention in a minute or two, Nikolai Ehlers. Like they got some cap decisions to make. I don't know if giving up your number 1, number 2 defenseman in Winnipeg makes a lot of sense, but like if those guys go to market, like you bang down the door, right? And you're offering them, these guys are going to want 6 years or 7 years north of 7 million, something like that. 6-7 million.
So the price itself scares me less than the term, but I think you bite the bullet. Like it also hinges on Reinbacher, to bring it back to him quickly, because if he's your future top end right-handed defenseman and you really believe in him, do you want to give 6-7 years to a guy like Ekblad, to a guy like Pionk, and basically close the door? Because Carrier, I think, is here to stay at least for the next couple seasons, and even when his contract runs out, if he's still jiving with Goulet or whoever he's playing with, that's a guy to re-sign. It's always easier to re-sign than to go out and sign someone. So I think he's staying. So, but as I say that, I realize how silly that is. Like we've never had a wealth at right D as long as we've been doing this podcast and prior to that. So maybe you just bite the bullet and you do that. I think Jonathan Kovacevic, in terms of a fit, actually works well. You said you'd rather have Mailloux in the lineup than Kovacevic. I don't know about that. I like that Kovacevic is just a no thrills, solid defenseman. And I say no thrills, but that's kind of funny based on his start with New Jersey getting a bunch of points. But he's not that style of player. He's a defensive player who doesn't make a lot of mistakes, who will understand the Canadian system very quickly because Jersey plays a similar one. So that could be a very, very good fit if you believe in Reinbacher. And it would cost way less. You wouldn't have to sign him 7 years, 3-4 years at most. He'd be happy with, I'm sure, maybe 5. But that's that. What do you think about that? Are you into the Ekblad and Pionk thing, or do you think it would be difficult and too rich for our blood?
I think for Kent Hughes, it would be almost malpractice to not pick up the phone and call those guys just to gauge it. Like, are you at all interested? What do you think? What can we do? Like, they need to explore it because, like, what are you doing next season? Is it your right side going to be Carrier, Struble, and Savard's not under contract? Like, you need to replenish it. So, like, there's going to be at least a spot open, I think, from Savard's standpoint. He slowed down, I think, too much to realistically. I mean, he can be a 7th next year, but I don't think you can have him in the lineup 80 games a season.
No.
So
that's a non-starter.
Yeah, to explore Pionk and Ekblad. I think that's what it is. I think realistically with Reinbacher, I would probably prefer to have him start. We'll see how the season goes. He picked up his first point on Saturday night. Really nice pass. Right now, I think you should plan for Reinbacher to be in Laval all of next season. For now, it might be 30 games in. You say we call him up and that's it. It's over. It's very much a Struble situation or a Beck situation from the past 2 years or Dobesh, where it's like halfway through the year, they're already too good. Jump them up. Those, I think it's very much something you investigate. And are you worried about the years? Yeah, maybe, but I don't know. That's free agency, man. That's how it goes. You're getting this guy without giving up any capital. You're not losing any players. Like with Crosby, one last time with Crosby, like, if we get to that universe, 100% Pittsburgh is asking for Michael Hage. 100%. And you would prefer you not lose.
They can ask all they want.
Right. But like that's what trades are. You give things up that you don't want to. Free agency is not that, but you get killed a bit on the contract. But I think the smarter franchises are going to have really good understanding and insight to what the cap's going to look like. And that maybe Aaron Ekblad at $7.2 million in year 5 is what like a $4 million contract is right now. Last thing. So like, that's who we've talked about. Like Sam Bennett, Neil Pionk, and Aaron Ekblad. The actual best free agents are wingers.
Yes. Marner,
Rantanen, Ehlers. And I'm going to put Brock Besser in here. I don't want the Canadiens to go after Brock Besser. He also apparently turned down $8 million a year. So that's good. Get out of here. They're all wingers. The Canadiens have Cole Caulfield, Juraj Slafkovsky under contract. Long term. Ivan Demidov's going to walk through the door in September, presumably into a top 6 role. Patrick Laine is the other guy with 1 year left on his contract. My question to you, Brian, would be, I guess maybe abstractly, is Mitch Marner better than Patrick Laine?
Is Mitch Marner better than Patrick Laine? Yeah.
Okay. Mikko Rantanen better than Patrick Laine?
Yeah. Yes. Of course.
Nikolai Ehlers?
Getting closer.
Ehlers.
At 5-on-5, he's a better player.
Yeah. I mean, Line has 3 goals in 34 games at 5-on-5.
Yeah.
So they're better players, but Line's in your organization already. So would there be like, if you're going after these guys, I don't know if you would. Like that's the last piece of like, we went through the hierarchy of what we want to go through. Centers, right-handed defenseman. Then it's like, okay, but who are the actual best free agents? Like if we're making a tiers list, it's Rantanen, it's Marner, it's Ehlers. Those are the top 3 guys available. They just don't happen to fit the exact needs that the Habs want. But that doesn't mean the Habs shouldn't go after them. So what should they do? Because those guys would presumably go into a top 6 role, which it's not Caulfield giving it up. It's probably not Slavkovsky giving it up or Ivan Demidov. This also brings us back to the whole centers discussion about like, is Kirby Dach gonna center all these guys? Like, who's the third? Like, is Owen Beck gonna center? Anyways, like, and so like any interest in these guys that like anything that makes sense realistically, or are you just calling Patrick Laine and say, what's the extension look like?
Yeah, I don't personally have an interest in these guys, despite the fact they are better than Patrick Laine. Ehlers I'll put aside, but Marner and Rantanen specifically. But the real reason isn't because of the quality compared to Laine. It's the price is not like, we're not talking about a Sam Bennett deal at 7-8 million or 6 or whatever. We're talking about 13 million now. So do we want to spend that much cap on these guys that, yes, would immediately be the best forwards on the team, depending how good Demidov looks and how much of a jump Suzuki makes and all this stuff. But I think at the very least, Rantanen, and the other thing I guess about Rantanen specifically, he went to Carolina.
Yeah.
And things are not very rosy there. And I get that Carolina is not the perfect team in terms of going there and playing well immediately. It seems to be the case for a bunch of guys. But you would hope that an elite player like Rantanen would just go in and go, oh no, this is how we play hockey now. And I'm going to show you guys. And instead he just kind of looks a little bit lost. So I don't know if that would be a problem in Montreal. He might come and just like jive immediately really well with guys. And then Slavkovsky can look up to him and be like, that's the player I want to be in a few years. And that could be great. But I think it's too much money spent in one specific area when it's not a need. You already have top end wingers. You don't have a second line center. That should be where the money is spent. If we're going to overpay on anything, I would want to overpay on a second line center.
Yeah.
If only there was one.
Well, so that's the issue. It's like, well, we have all this money. We can't just keep re-signing our guys. We should go out and get someone. Marner intrigues me. Marner definitely. Rantanen, there's too much bad vibes with Rantanen right now. Ehlers too, but I don't think Winnipeg's going to let go of Nikola either. Like if they're choosing, they have like 6-7 guys that got to like Iafallo, Velarde. Like there's a ton of guys that got to re-sign. Ehlers is one of those guys I'm very sure of that they're going to re-sign. Marner's the one that intrigues me, but I don't know. It's
man, that would be fun to pull him away from Toronto.
Well, it's also because all these years of playoff disappointment, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is the offseason. They're finally going to trade Marner," and now like, well, Marner now holds all the cards. He's now the one in control, especially if Marner has. I'm not saying the Leafs will, but if Marner has a good playoff, like if they lose in, I mean, they're probably not going to play Florida in the first round. Let's say they lose to Florida in round 2, and Marner has 11 points in 11 games or something like that. I feel like Marner holds all the cards at this point, and I mean, him though. Like the bidding for Marner starts at what, 11 and a half, 11, 12?
Yeah, probably closer to 12.
That's a lot of money, man. So, anyways, that was just a primer for free. Point is, like, free agency is very complicated and like not perfect. The way a trade you can pinpoint something you want exactly. Now, the player itself might change, but the archetype you want, there's dozens of options.
Yeah, right.
Free agency is much more complicated because it's a smaller group of players, and also a lot of teams have money this year.
So let's jump to the last player on my list here.
Okay.
A goalie. Karel Vejmelka is a UFA. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We don't need a goalie, but I love Vejmelka. Somebody's going to be very, very happy with him next season. I don't think he stays in Utah, but
yeah. Well, I mean, no, the Habs wouldn't. No, the Habs, from a goaltending standpoint, they're very happy with where they are right now. I have wondered, like in a universe where everyone's trying to get McDavid a cup, I'm like, what does an Armia Evans Montembeault package look like? That's got to be worth a lot, right? And isn't that exactly what Edmonton would want?
Yeah, penalty killing and goaltending.
Forwards,
that's all they're missing.
Penalty killing, goal. Yeah, I mean, Anyways,
interesting.
I think we're 1 year away from Montembeault realistically being part of some of these discussions. In all honesty.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, so that'll do it. Look, we talked about a lot of stuff. I think for the most part, Habs are playing well, but I think it's important not to lose the forest for the tree. So I think that's what, hopefully we successfully did that in our 3 burning questions. It's going to be a fun week. We'll see what happens. Don't get lost in the sauce with all the rumors. Remember, if a rumor comes out, who was saying them? If it comes from Frank Saravelli, just don't believe it at all. But for all intents and purposes, have fun. We'll be back next week to recap the trade deadline and also continue to get into the new slate of hockey games. And the Habs have a few big ones coming up. You mentioned the Buffalo one that'll, hopefully goes well. And then I think there's a Calgary game towards the end of the week. There should be a lot of fun, exciting hockey. Maybe not the highest quality, but exciting. So until then, you can follow us on social media at HabslandPod on Blue Sky and TikTok. And feel free to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify. I noticed we've gotten a few more, so thank you very much. There are a few more 5-star ratings up there, or on Apple Podcast. And until next Monday, go Habs.